Tonight we are remembering the Emanuel 9. WYFF News 4's Tim Waller is live in Charleston tonight. Tim.
Carol, a few minutes ago, this entire section of Calhoun Street facing the Emanuel AME Church was closed off to the public as friends, family members, and total strangers, people coming here from all over the country, come here to pay their last respects to Clemente Pinckney. Well, Nigel, we waited hours for Air Force One to land there at the Charleston Air Force Base, and finally at 1:05 this afternoon, it touched down. Check this out, the giant and very familiar VC-25 airplane touching down on the tarmac at Charleston Air Force Base. In fact, as I stand here right now, I can still hear chants in the background, people screaming, "Take it down, take it down," referring, of course, to the Confederate flag, which has flown here on the ground since 2000. Before that, it was on top of the State House dome, but it was the compromise that brought it down here in front of the Confederate Memorial.
WYFF News 4's Tim Waller was there and joins us live from the State House. Tim.
Nigel, the rally took place in the scorching Columbia heat with several hundred people attending, and their message here was loud and clear.
Fired up! Ready to go! Fired up! Ready to go!
Hundreds of people chanting and waving signs, insisting the Confederate flag be taken down. Many South Carolina lawmakers have promised to do so. Joyce Gilliard says they should keep that promise.
We want to hold them accountable for it, so we want to make sure that their actions speak louder than their words.
WYFF News 4's Tim Waller is live there tonight with the proof. Tim.
Well, Carol, I'm sitting here at Bruce Crane's kitchen table right now, and there is a reason he's not sitting here with his family having dinner. It's right here behind me. Check this out. This is a tree limb jutting through the Crane's kitchen ceiling. It's coming all the way down through here. If we move in a little bit, you can look all the way up in that hole and see that this is a serious structural damage to the Crane's house. It is absolutely covered in whatever you call this. Are we talking about snow or are we talking about sleet here? You can see a fine powder right here accumulating. But the thing is, every now and then it seems like a light mist of rain is hitting the roads, and every hour that passes, it just keeps packing onto the roads. We've been parked here for about, 2 or 3 hours now, and look at the accumulation that has formed on the WYFF News 4 news vehicle. Mostly slush, but when I get down here to the bottom part of the windshield, I'm starting to get some ice accumulation right around here on the tire rims. If we drop down about a foot, you can see the little icicles starting to form right around here.
Enforcing that cease and desist order is going to be difficult at best. Tim Waller is here with the story tonight. Tim?
Well, we learned today, Michael and Carol, that neither the Public Service Commission nor the State Office of Regulatory Staff has the authority or the manpower to stop Uber drivers. Today, the executive director of the State Office of Regulatory Staff told me we have 3 full-time agents on the road, 3 for the entire state. He went on to say we don't have the money for things like sting operations. And we've also learned the way the law is written in South Carolina, the cease and desist order against Uber has no bearing inside municipalities such as Greenville. Speaking of that, I hailed an Uber ride today using the app on my smartphone to see if Uber drivers were still up and running. Turns out they are. And one driver told me he has no intention of shutting down.
Someone will have to take me to jail or write me a ticket.
She's sharing her story for the first time with WYFF News 4's Tim Waller.
Well, this former teacher, Michael and Carol, is now a convicted felon. She will never work in a classroom again. And while she disputes some of the facts of her case that made headlines 3 years ago, her story provides insight in what has been a continuing problem. Why are you doing an interview?
To, I guess, get my side out a little bit. I'm not the bad person people have portrayed me to be.
It's been more than 3 years since Deanna Roberts' name and face have been in the news. You're a felon now.
Correct.
What's that like?
Extremely hard.
The former chemistry teacher at Tomasi Salem School lost her home, her husband, her teaching certificate after pleading guilty to having sex in her classroom with a 16-year-old student she was tutoring after school.
And I put myself in a situation that I shouldn't have been in.
While Robert disputes some of the facts of her case, she admits she crossed a line.
And I did tell him I loved him, but it wasn't a romantic love. It was, it was more of a mother to son type deal.
The boy told his parents told police. Robert got 5 years probation and 1 year of house arrest, along with harsh words from parents who've confronted her.
What did they say?
That I destroyed a child's life, that I'm no good, that my children should be taken from me.
Robert isn't the only teacher who has crossed a line with their students. Since January 2011, 75 other South Carolina teachers have had their teaching certificates revoked for sex-related offenses. A WIFF News 4 Investigates analysis of state disciplinary actions taken against teachers found 28% of these cases involved inappropriate contact of some sort with students. Everything from teachers flirting with students to texting explicit photos. 18% of all disciplinary actions involved actual sexual contact with students. The majority of those cases, 31%, involved teachers at upstate schools. An Easley High School teacher charged with the sexual battery of one of his students at his home. A middle school band director charged with criminal sexual conduct after contact with two 15-year-olds. An elementary school teacher accused of having sex with an underage boy at a party at her home. And the list goes on. More than a dozen cases in the upstate alone since 2011. We asked Robert, how does this happen?
Isn't it clear when you're a teacher, you don't text a student? You don't put yourself in a situation
It is.
where there's no one else around.
It is. I never had an issue with that before, ever.
Robert admits she used poor judgment and is now paying the price for her actions.
And some people will say that's what I deserve.
Do you think you deserve all this?
I made bad choices, so I have to accept the consequences for what choices I've made. But the depth of what I've had to go through, no.
Kathy Maness, Executive Director of the Palmetto State Teachers Association, says cases like these represent a very small fraction of the more than 50,000 teachers in this state. But Maness says one case is too many and says teachers who do this have no business being around children. Carol?
WIFF News 4 Investigates Tim Waller is here with the exclusive story for us tonight. Tim?
Well, the company itself is headquartered in Florida, Michael and Gabby, but they have a huge satellite office in Greenville. In fact, we spoke to a man who used to work at that office. He says what's written in the Florida Attorney General's lawsuit is something he witnessed every day.
When Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi charged a company near Tampa with violating the state's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act on November 5th, we uncovered a Greenville connection, a branch of the same company doing business on Pelham Road. According to the lawsuit, GSA Greenville and GSA South Carolina were among the dozens of company names used to mislead customers around the country.
This company is doing a shell game.
This man, a former employee of the company who left to work for a business that also deals in federal contracts, spoke exclusively to WIFF News 4 Investigates on the condition we didn't show his face or reveal his name. We asked him about the claims and the lawsuit.
Does this come close to what you saw?
I think it's very accurate. I think it touches on a lot of their bad business practices.
The Florida lawsuit accuses the company of making false and misleading claims as to the likelihood of successfully landing a government contract. This while charging fees of $5,000 to $8,000. Salespersons, the lawsuit says, were assigned various aliases and business names. This former employee says calls from the Pelham Road office appear to be coming from cities across the country to make them seem bigger.
Phoenix, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. There was Chicago, Illinois, Atlanta, Georgia, Des Moines, Iowa, Washington, D.C., kind of went on and on.
You were encouraged to use a fake name.
They gave me an email out of corporate from Florida with a list of fake company names, They wanted me to pick one. Most of them were very bad names. I picked the best one that I thought, and then I picked the location, which was Atlanta.
He says the job paid good money, that some sales associates made several $1,000s a week, often by telling customers they qualified for government contracts when they didn't, which is also mentioned in the lawsuit.
Selling companies that there just really isn't a fit with them, or they didn't meet the criteria, knowing that, but just needed to get the sale, and anything to get the sale they would do.
WYFF News 4 investigates, tried repeatedly to contact the company on Pelham Road for comment. John Warren is listed in a press release issued by the company as president of Contract Award Services, one of the companies listed on the Florida Attorney General's lawsuit. In a 2013 court filing, he's listed as national sales director for another company on the list, GSA Applications.
How you doing?
When our calls and emails were not returned, we went to his office and found him.
You guys are private property.
I think you're John, aren't you?
You need to leave, gentlemen. This is GPE of the wrong company.
Right, but you're John Warren.
You have the wrong company.
Can we talk to you?
Not now.
Please.
No, please leave.
GPE is a new company not listed in the Florida lawsuit. Our source says GPE stands for GSA Program Experts. He showed us online reviews that say it too is a company that helps businesses land government contracts. Reviews that thank John Warren and his team.
We asked the Florida Attorney General's office how this legal action will affect the company's operations in Greenville, if at all. They wouldn't comment, saying their investigation is ongoing. We've also learned John Warren, who runs that Pelham Road office, is suing 3 of his former employees who left to start their own government contract business.
Tim Waller has been digging into the story. Tim.
Well, Nigel and Gabby, how and when police use their tasers depends on the agency's use of force policy. Our investigation found while many policies discourage the use of tasers on fleeing suspects, the Greenville Police Department's policy does not.
It's a smartphone video that's been played many times and scrutinized by an angry community.
He's calling for his mama. Calling for his mama. And you keep tasing him?
Please don't do this. He has options. Don't do this.
Tario Anderson tased by police when he ran from officers, as noted in the official police report. WYFF News 4 investigates obtained the first-person accounts of the arresting officers, who responded to what police say was the sound of multiple gunshots in Anderson's neighborhood. Upon shining a spotlight on Tario, Officer Ryan Weeks wrote, he put his hands in his pockets, turned in the opposite direction, and began walking toward Burn Street. When we exited our patrol vehicles, Tario began fleeing. I told him to stop running approximately 3 times. I then warned Tario if he didn't stop, he would be tased.
He don't understand what you're saying.
The 34-year-old autistic man was shocked not once but twice for not complying with the officer's command.
You know, as a result of this incident, we'll review our force policy. I have reviewed the force policy.
Greenville Police Chief Ken Miller has faced tough questions ever since the incident. Miller says he's reviewing the city's force response policy, which says tasers are appropriate for subjects exhibiting defensive resistance. Police say that's when a person tries to run from officers.
Do you think tasers are overused by law enforcement?
I think they can be. And that's why you have to really look at your policy and then you have to look at what's happening.
While Greenville's policy allows officers to use tasers on people who try to flee, WYFF News 4 investigates has learned many agencies in our area don't allow that. The Greer Police Department's use of force policy says tasers may not be used on fleeing suspects unless the suspect is a threat to himself or others. In Lawrence County, tasers cannot be used on non-aggressive resistors. And in Henderson County, they can't be deployed on suspects who flee when no threat is posed. Taser International, the maker of the popular X26 model used by Greenville Police, warns fleeing should not be the sole justification of using electronic control weapons against a subject.
Tasers shouldn't be used on people who aren't being aggressive.
USC professor Jeffrey Alpert is an authority on police use of tasers. A study he authored for the National Institute of Justice found, while tasers reduce injuries to both officers and suspects, they can also be the cause of injuries in certain environments.
When a suspect runs from police, On a sidewalk, you would not recommend using a taser on that person.
Most departments I've seen now prohibit the use of a taser when someone is running, particularly on the sidewalk or in the street on pavement, because if you shoot someone with a taser, it's very likely that person is going to fall down and not be able to use his hands and arms to protect himself and just fall right on his face. And that can cause some very serious injuries.
Officers may make a mistake. We're not perfect, but people will resist our authority routinely. And so our job gets messy.
Miller says if officers had not used a taser to stop Tario Anderson from running, their alternative would have been to tackle Anderson, who is 6'6" and weighs 320 pounds.
You're trying to get control of them physically and you're wrestling around on the ground. Guns get taken away and police officers get killed.
That may have been one reason Greenville police used a taser to stop Anderson, and because police department policy allows it.
Again, Chief Miller says he plans to review the city's taser policy. He says there is also no rule in the policy on how many times an officer can pull the trigger on their taser, and the chief, who is new to Greenville, says he believes those limits are important. Meanwhile, Chief Miller says the dual investigation into the Tario Anderson incident involving SLED and his own department's Internal Affairs Division is expected to wrap up soon. Nigel?
WYFF News 4 Investigates Tim Waller found there are thousands of them in the state lining the roads many of us drive every day.
On Interstate 385 eastbound at the busy Roper Mountain Road exit is a guardrail that looks like any other. But this model, according to a whistleblower lawsuit, has caused serious injuries and fatalities.
What I have seen and witnessed, I'd hit anything else but one of these. These things are not working.
Joshua Harmon filed the lawsuit against Trinity Highway Products of Texas. Trinity is the maker of the popular ET Plus guardrail used on highways across the country. Harmon claims in 2005 the company changed the design without telling anyone. The result, he claims, is a guardrail that acts like a spear instead of peeling back during impact. He claims it cost a North Carolina man his legs and a Tennessee woman her life.
The mother that got distracted, the grandmother, the guardrail went through and cut both her legs off. The Marine who fell asleep cut both his legs off. The grandmother didn't survive, the Marine did.
The maker of these guardrails insists their design change has not made the ET Plus unsafe. Still, we wondered how many guardrails like this exist in South Carolina. And are there plans to replace them?
WYFF News 4 Investigates found this instruction manual on the SCDOT website for installing ET Plus guardrails. We also found the agency's list of qualified suppliers, which includes Trinity Products. But District Engineer Mike Holden told us the guardrails aren't being installed anymore.
It's no longer on our approved list, so we don't use it in any construction or maintenance operations at this time.
And so there is a moratorium on these particular
That's
guardrails?
correct, yes.
As far as how many of these guardrails exist in the state, Holden says it's hard to estimate. His best guess is around 2,000. None, as far as he knows, have caused death or injuries, as victims in other states claim.
How big of a safety concern is this?
It's a big concern. We're trying to take necessary steps to rectify the situation the best we can.
By that he means waiting for the government to conduct further testing on these guardrails. He says replacing them, as the state of Virginia is now doing, would take a great deal of time and money. But it's something South Carolina will do, he says, if it means saving one life. Tim Waller, WYFF News 4, Greenville.
The plant left a mixture of chemicals in the ground. And WYFF News 4 Investigates Tim Waller uncovered whoever buys that property will have to clean it up. Tim?
Well, Gabby, let me tell you exactly where I am. I'm directly behind Whole Foods grocery store on one of the busiest sections of Woodruff Road. The MD building you see here behind me is considered prime commercial property, but there is a catch.
This is Greenville's busiest commercial strip. The shops at Green Ridge here, Whole Foods over here. But the largest piece of land facing Carolina Point Drive that could easily support a shopping center, hotels, and restaurants has been waiting to be developed since before all the other stores in the area were built, and is still waiting.
For 15 years, the property, which is about 40 acres, and the building, now known as the Crescent Center, has been shuffled from one owner to another and then another. Each had high hopes for the property, but nothing ever materialized. Whoever buys this land will have to deal with what the property used to be before the building was remodeled in the early 2000s with the hope of turning it into a high-tech office park. The property was home to a massive fibers plant that employed 930 people at its height. It was a plant that, like so many others in its day, left a lasting environmental footprint. Is this a troubled piece of property?
I really feel that that site will be developed when the time is right for it. Now, is that going to be next year? Don't know. It may be a couple of years.
The former Hearst Celanese Fiber Industries plant that operated here for 20 years until the late 1980s left a mixture of chemicals buried in the ground. Any new owners of the property will be required to clean it up. State health officials say the site has been through many phases of cleanup over the last several years. But testing conducted as recently as September found ethylene glycol and chlorobenzene in 3 remaining areas of the property. Both have been known to cause liver and kidney damage if ingested in large enough amounts. One concern is this large patch of dirt where nothing has grown in more than a decade. Environmental experts say while these types of cleanups can add millions to the cost of developing a property, they say it's not uncommon, since many prime properties were once the site of an industry of some sort.
A small state like South Carolina, there's thousands of sites that have some sort of environmental contamination problem. And then the challenge is defining which ones are significant and which ones aren't.
One familiar property in downtown Greenville was also the site of a major cleanup. The Elliott Davis property at Broad and Church Streets housed a Duke Energy coal gasification plant until the early 1990s. Soil from the property had to be removed before the building could be constructed. But soil won't be the only expense for the future owners of Crescent Center. The 780,000 square foot building, a section of the original Hearst Celanese plant, must first be demolished, and when it is, more testing will be required to see if the soil beneath it is contaminated. So that's kind of a double whammy against the property.
It is. But again, it's not something that's totally uncommon in the market.
It may not be uncommon, but for this part of Greenville, land with no buyer for this long is unexpected. I did reach out to the owners of this property via the real estate company that's handling it right now. They said right now there are interested developers who are looking at this property. In the meantime, DHEC officials say that Elliott Davis building downtown that used to have contamination in the soil but was cleaned up is a perfect example of property that can be brought back and made safe and useful. Greenville city officials say they hope the same thing will happen right here. Tim Waller, WYFF News 4, live in Greenville.